When the bear sat down next to me in the mountains, my breath caught in my throat, because I knew this wasn't a mistake. I wasn't some tourist stumbling into trouble. I've been a shepherd most of my life. These mountains raised me. I know every ridge, every wind, and I know bears, not personally, of course, but enough to respect them. They keep their distance. You keep yours. That's the rule. That morning felt like any other. The sky was pale gray, the kind that promises either rain or secrets. My sheep grazed along the slope, bells clinking like quiet prayers. I was sitting on a flat rock, drinking the last sip of lukewarm tea from my tin mug, when I noticed something in the dirt. Tracks. Big ones. Fresh. Bear tracks don't scare me anymore. You see them now and then, and life goes on. I remember thinking, probably passed through last night. I didn't even tell the dogs. I just sat there, letting the silence hum in my ears. But then the silence broke. It wasn't a twig snap. It was heavier, like someone shifting weight on the earth itself. I froze. My first thought was wolf, but wolves don't sound like that. I turned my head slowly, and there he was, a bear, a massive brown wall of fur and muscle, no more than 10 steps away. I swear, time cracked in half. Everything in me screamed move, but I couldn't. My legs went dead, my heart started punching my ribs. The dogs? Gone. They'd vanished like smoke. Just me, the sheep, and this king. He didn't charge, didn't growl, didn't even look hungry. He just walked, calm, deliberate, and then sat down, right next to me. I could feel the heat coming off him, like standing too close to a fire. My throat locked up, my mind spun with every story I'd ever heard. Bears rip people apart. They break bones like twigs. They don't sit for tea. And yet here he was, sitting, looking at me. Those eyes, God, those eyes, dark, steady, almost human in their stillness. No anger, no hunger, just presence. Like he'd been walking for 1,000 miles and finally found what he was looking for. I didn't breathe. My hand still clutched the empty mug, as if that thin piece of metal could save me. He turned his head slightly, slow as a priest lifting a chalice, and stared straight into me. Not at me, into me. I can't explain what that felt like. Fear, yes, the raw animal kind that drills through your bones. But there was something else under it, something that shouldn't be there. A calm, like, if he wanted me dead, I'd be dead already. Like I wasn't prey, like he knew something I didn't. The sheep sensed him, started shuffling higher up the slope. Their bells trembled in the air, but he didn't flinch, didn't glance at them. His entire focus was on me, as if I mattered more than a whole flock of easy meat. And in that moment, a thought cut through the panic. Why? Why me? I tried to swallow, but my throat was sandpaper. My brain scrambled for rules. Don't run. Don't make eye contact. Don't... What? What do you do when a bear sits next to you like a neighbor on a park bench? Seconds stretched like wire. I waited for a move, for a sign, for anything that made sense. A growl, a lunge, a swipe of those claws that could unbutton me from skull to spine. Nothing. Just stillness. I swear I could hear my own blood. Finally, I whispered to myself, barely a breath, if I don't move, he'll leave. That was the plan. Stay still. Let him get bored. Let him walk away. But I was wrong. The bear moved first. Slowly, like a shadow deciding where to fall, he turned his head toward the mountains, then back to me. That stare pinned me harder than claws ever could. His breath rolled out in a long, steaming ribbon, hanging in the cold morning air. Then, without a sound, he stood. I've seen bears stand before, in books, in pictures, but nothing prepares you for the real thing. It's like watching a tree pull its roots from the earth. He rose up, shoulders rippling like earth shifting under snow, and for a second, I thought this was it. My last breath, my last heartbeat. But he didn't attack. He just stood there, towering over me, then dropped back on all fours and started walking. Away. Not fast, not in a panic, just a heavy, deliberate pace. He took maybe 10 steps up a narrow path, then stopped. And here's the part that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. He looked back, right at me. It wasn't random. It wasn't chance. His head turned slow, deliberate, and those eyes, they found me, held me, like a question I couldn't answer. I sat frozen on that rock, heart pounding so hard it made the tin mug rattle in my hand. For a moment, I thought, this is good. He's leaving. It's over. Relief rushed through me like a flood breaking a dam. I thought that was the end of it. God, how wrong I was. Because the way he looked, it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like an invitation. Almost like he was saying, come. I laughed under my breath, a broken, terrified sound. My voice cracked when I whispered, "What do you want from me?" He didn't answer, of course, just turned back toward the mountains and took a few more steps, then stopped again, looked back again. My stomach twisted. I didn't move. My whole life has been about rules, for sheep, for dogs, for weather, for predators, and one rule has kept me breathing. You never, ever follow a bear. But this wasn't a rule I knew. This was something else, something I didn't have a name for. My sheep had scattered farther up the slope. Their bells clanged sharp in the thin air, nervous, urgent. They wanted no part of this, and maybe they were right. Maybe I should have stayed put, let the bear go, pretend this never happened. But then he stopped for the third time, turned his massive head over that hulking shoulder and fixed those dark eyes on me like he was waiting. I don't know why, but my chest tightened. My mind was screaming, run. My legs, they didn't listen. They just stood me up. The air burned cold in my lungs as I took a step forward, then another, each one heavier than the last. My boots scraped the dirt, loud as thunder in that silence. And the strangest thing? He didn't move, didn't growl, didn't even twitch. He just watched, steady as a mountain, until I came close enough to hear his breath again. Then, and I swear this happened, he turned and started walking. Slow, measured, like he knew I was behind him, like he wanted me there. Every instinct screamed, you're insane. You're walking into your own grave. But something else, something deep, something I can't explain, pushed me on. We climbed a narrow trail that cut between two ridges, where the wind carried the smell of pine and stone and something wilder than both. My palms were slick. My heartbeat wouldn't slow. My ears strained for the sound of anything else. Wolves, another bear, anything. But it was just him and me. And then, just as suddenly as he started, he stopped. Dead still. The muscles under his fur tensed like a bowstring. I froze too. He turned his head toward me again. This time, closer than ever. I could see the scars along his muzzle, the frost clinging to the tips of his fur, the black pools of his eyes. And then, he did something that cracked my soul open. He stepped toward me. One heavy paw, then another, slow enough for my heart to measure every beat. Then his massive head swung down and nudged me. Not hard, not violent, just a firm, almost gentle push against my thigh, like a dog might do when it wants attention. I stumbled, breath tearing out of me, every muscle screaming to run, and yet I didn't. I just stood there, knees shaking, staring into those eyes, wondering what in God's name was happening. Because in that touch, in that silent press of fur and bone and warmth, there was no threat, no hunger, just purpose. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I never thought I'd feel standing in front of a bear. Trust. The bear didn't wait after that nudge. He just turned and started walking, slow but sure, like a path had already been chosen. And God help me, I followed. Not because I was brave, not because I'm stupid, but because something in that moment, in that touch, broke the old rules, the ones I'd lived by my whole life. My boots crunched against loose rock as we climbed. The air grew colder, thinner, like even the sky was holding its breath. Pines closed in around us, tall and dark, their needles whispering secrets I didn't want to know. I kept glancing back. My flock was gone, nothing but bells fading into distance. The dogs vanished. My whole world was behind me, and ahead, only him, this mountain giant who could kill me in one swipe, but hadn't. Every instinct in me screamed turn back. Every story I'd ever heard said no man walks into a bear's shadow and lives to tell it. And yet, step by step, I kept going. The trail narrowed, hugging a cliff on one side, dropping into a black void on the other. My heart slammed against my ribs. Sweat stung my eyes even in the cold. I told myself, if he wanted me dead, I'd be dead already. That thought stuck like a nail in my mind, over and over. If he wanted to kill me, why this? Why lead me here? The bear didn't hurry. He didn't even look back this time, just lumbered forward with the weight of something ancient in his stride, like he was following a law I couldn't see. We pushed deeper into the gorge, where the sun barely touched the ground. Rocks loomed like broken teeth. The air smelled of stone and shadow. My breath fogged in front of me, ragged and loud in the silence. Then he stopped. No warning. Just froze mid-step, head lifting, ears twitching. The sudden stillness hit me like a fist. I nearly tripped trying not to make a sound. He turned his head slightly, nose to the wind, and then it happened. A sound rolled out of him. Not a growl, not a roar. Something deeper, lower. A sound that crawled into my bones and stayed there. It was a call, long and guttural, like the earth itself was speaking through his chest. It made the rocks hum, made my lungs clamp shut. I froze. What else was in there? Because that's what it felt like. A message sent to something unseen, something waiting in the dark beyond that bend in the gorge. Every hair on my neck stood up. My brain fired pictures I didn't want. Another bear, bigger than him, crouched in the shadows. Wolves, a mountain lion, death, wearing fur and teeth. I could feel the sweat trickle down my spine as his call faded into silence. A silence so sharp, it felt alive. I braced myself, fists clenched, ready for an avalanche of fur and rage, ready for my body to hit the rocks and never rise again. Seconds stretched, 10, 20, 30, nothing. Then, a sound came back, but it wasn't a growl. It wasn't even close. It was high, thin, fragile, a cry, so faint it barely touched the air, like the voice of something small, something helpless. And it wasn't an animal sound, not the way I know animal sounds. It sounded wrong, human, almost. A sob choked by distance and fear. My heart jerked sideways, my breath shattered in my throat. No, that's not possible. The bear's head lifted higher, ears sharp, listening. Then, without looking back at me, he started moving again. Faster this time, a low urgency in his steps, stones scattering under his weight. And me? I followed. I couldn't stop if I tried. That cry had burned itself into me like fire on skin. Because in that single sound, every fear I had broke into something else, something worse, something heavier than any bear's shadow. What in God's name was waiting for us up there? That sound wouldn't leave my head. Thin, sharp, almost like a child crying through a wall of stone. I blinked hard, trying to shake it out. Maybe it was the wind, twisted through the cliffs. Maybe I was losing my mind. God knows fear can make you hear things. But the bear heard it too. I saw it in the way his ears twitched, the way his whole body shifted forward, tense with purpose. Then he moved, faster now, claws scraping rock, shoulders rippling under that heavy fur like rolling earth. And I followed. God help me, I followed. Every step felt like a choice between sense and madness. My boots skidded on scree, heart battering my ribs, lungs slicing cold air into shards. That cry came again, faint, desperate, like something calling from the edge of the world. What is that? What is that? The gorge narrowed to a knife edge, jagged cliffs rising like broken walls. The bear threaded through as if he'd walked this path 1,000 times. I stumbled behind, grabbing roots, scraping palms raw. The sound grew clearer, higher now, frantic, beating against the silence. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a pale shape clinging to the gray. But then it moved, a small body wedged on a sliver of rock, trembling so hard it shook dust into the abyss below. A goat, a young one, no bigger than a lamb. My stomach flipped. My mind roared, no, no, this can't be. But it was. I knew that goat, knew the curve of those horns, the patch of white on its side. It was mine. One I'd lost days ago when the fog rolled in thick and I thought a wolf had taken it. I'd mourned it, buried it in my head, and now here it was, alive, teetering over death. The bear stopped just shy of the drop, massive shoulders hunched, staring down at that tiny scrap of life. Then, and I swear this will follow me to my grave, he turned his head and looked at me, not a glance, not a flicker, a look, deep, heavy, and in that look was a message so clear it slammed through me like thunder. Help him. I don't know how I moved. My legs were water, my hands shaking like leaves, but somehow I edged past the bear, knees scraping rock, breath burning. The ledge was a cruel joke, barely wide enough for my boots. One wrong move, and I'd join the nothing below. The goat bleated weakly, eyes rolling white, hooves scraping for grip. Easy, easy boy, I whispered, voice cracking, though I don't know if it was for him or me. I flattened against the cliff, fingers clawing for holds, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. One more step, then another. The drop yawned black beneath me. When I reached him, he jerked back in terror, nearly pitching off the edge. My gut turned to ice. I pressed closer, murmuring nonsense, soft as prayer. My hands closed around his small, shaking body, and I felt his ribs flutter like a bird's wings. With every ounce of strength, I pulled him in, cradling that fragile life against my chest. My boots slid, gravel skittering into the void, but I held on. God help me, I held on. When I crawled back to solid ground, my knees buckled. I just sat there, clutching that goat like a lost child, breath tearing in and out. I looked up at the bear. He was still there, still watching. For a moment, the world stopped. Just me, the goat trembling in my arms, and that giant standing like a mountain come alive. His eyes met mine, and something in me broke wide open, because in those dark pools, I didn't see hunger, didn't see instinct. I saw recognition, gratitude. The weight of that nearly crushed me more than the climb. I whispered, voice barely a breath, "You knew." And for the first time, I believed it. Relief slammed through me like a wave. I'd saved the goat. The danger was past. The nightmare was over. I thought that was the end of it. But then, the bear moved, slow, purposeful, toward me. And what he did next shattered everything I thought I knew about this world. The goat was still trembling in my arms when the bear stepped closer. I stiffened, every muscle screaming to run, but I didn't move. Couldn't. My hands gripped that small body like it was the only thing tethering me to this world. The bear lowered his head, slowly. So slow it felt like the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Then his nose touched the goat. Just a whisper of a touch, gentle, careful, like he was afraid to break it. His breath rolled warm against the little one's fur, and for a second, the goat stilled, as if even it understood this wasn't harm. I sat frozen, watching something I knew shouldn't exist, watching a predator touch prey like kin. Then he lifted his head and looked at me. Not a glance, not a flicker, a look that split me open from the inside, deep, steady, heavy as stone. And in that look, I swear to you, I saw something I can't explain. Gratitude. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was older than both, something carved out of the earth before words were born. My throat locked. My eyes burned. I heard my own voice crack in a whisper. You knew. Because he had. Somehow, some way, he knew that goat was mine. He knew what it meant to me. He'd brought me here not for him, but for me. I thought about every story I'd ever heard. Bears raiding flocks, snatching kids, leaving nothing but blood and silence. That's what nature does. That's the law. But this bear, he broke that law like it was nothing, and in breaking it, he broke me too. For a moment, the world tilted. I wasn't sitting on a cliff with a wild beast anymore. I was standing on the edge of something bigger, something I'd never touched before. The goat shifted against my chest, bleated soft like a tired child. That sound yanked me back, and for the first time since this began, I thought, it's over. The danger's done. He'll leave now. This miracle is finished. I was wrong, because instead of turning away, the bear stepped closer. His shadow fell over me like dusk. My heart slammed hard enough to crack ribs. And then, God help me, his head dipped low, and he pressed it against me, against my hand. That massive skull, heavy with bone and muscle, nudged my fingers with a touch so startlingly tender, it stole the breath from my lungs. I froze, my whole body locked like ice, except my hand. It moved, slowly, without thought, without permission. My fingers slid through the coarse fur at his crown, warm and thick, tangled with bits of pine. And in that instant, I felt everything. The wildness, the weight, the raw, breathing truth of a life that owed me nothing, and yet trusted me anyway. Tears hit my face before I knew they'd come, hot in the cold air. I didn't even wipe them. Couldn't. My vision blurred as that great head lingered against my hand for one endless heartbeat, then lifted. He turned then. No hurry, no fear. Just a slow, deliberate walk toward the mouth of the gorge, paws whispering against stone. I sat there, shaking, clutching the goat, watching him go. Halfway to the bend, he stopped and looked back. That look, God, that look will haunt me forever, because it wasn't just a glance. It was a closing door and an open wound. A farewell, yes, but more than that, a knowing, like he'd written something on my soul and wanted to make sure I'd never erase it. And then he was gone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything I couldn't name, everything I'd seen and shouldn't have. I sat there a long time, holding that goat, staring at the place where a bear had stood and broken the world I thought I knew. I don't remember the climb back down. 1 minute I was staring at the empty mouth of that gorge, my hand still burning from where his head had pressed against it. The next, I was stumbling down the slope, clutching the goat like a lifeline. My legs shook so hard I thought they'd snap. My breath tore in and out, ragged and sharp, each step pounding the truth deeper into me. This happened. This really happened. When I saw the flock, my throat closed. The dogs barked wild, circling like they'd found a ghost. Maybe they had. I dropped to my knees and set the goat down, and it stumbled into the herd with a bleat so small, so thin, like a thread pulling me back to the world I knew. Except, that world didn't fit anymore. By the time I reached the others, the sun had slid down the sky, bleeding gold into the peaks. The men were standing by the fire, talking low, voices rough with smoke and wind. When they saw me, they stared like they'd seen the dead walk, and when they saw what I carried, the stares turned to disbelief. "Where the hell did you find him?" one asked, eyes sharp under his hat brim. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out at first. My throat was dry, scraped raw from silence and fear, and something bigger than both. Finally, I whispered, "A bear." They laughed, hard and loud, like my words were a joke to warm their hands on. "Sure," one said, slapping his knee. "A bear brought him back, eh? Maybe he packed him in his lunchbox too." Another spat in the dirt, grinning. "You're lucky that thing didn't take your head clean off." I didn't laugh. Couldn't. I just stood there, clutching my arms tight to keep the shiver in. Finally, I said, quiet but sharp, "It wasn't luck." They stopped laughing then. Not because they believed me, but because of the way I said it, like a man standing on the edge of something they couldn't see. One of them frowned. "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer right away. My eyes slid past them, past the fire, past the sheep huddled close against the wind, to the mountains rising black against the bruised sky. Somewhere out there, he was walking away, the one who broke the rules, the one who changed mine. "Why me?" I whispered, mostly to myself. "Why would a bear do that?" No one spoke. The fire popped. Sparks jumped like startled stars. Then one of the men nudged me with his boot. "Come on, tell it straight. You saw tracks, didn't you?" Tracks. The word hit me like a shove. I turned, scanning the ground, and there they were. Deep prints pressed into the earth, big as plates, leading right up to where I'd come from. The men followed my stare. One whistled low. "Son of a," he muttered. "You weren't lying." The laughter died for good then. They didn't mock me anymore, didn't smile. They just stared at those tracks like they were doorways to something they didn't want to open. Finally, the oldest of them, a man with eyes like old wood, said, "You were lucky." I looked at him, looked hard, and for the first time, I said it out loud. It wasn't luck. It was something else. I didn't tell them about the look in his eyes. I couldn't. They wouldn't understand. Hell, I didn't understand. But I knew this much. I saw in his eyes more humanity than in some people I know. The words tasted strange, like they didn't belong in this world. But they were true. Every syllable. The men said nothing after that. They just went back to the fire, quiet now, like the wind had stolen their tongues. Me? I sat apart, staring into the dark where the mountains swallowed the day. My hands still smelled of his fur, sharp and wild and real. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in me had been rewritten on that cliff. The mountains felt different after that day, or maybe it was me. I tried to go back to normal, to long hours on the slope, the cold bite of wind, the rhythm of bells. But every sound, every shadow made my chest ache like a bruise I couldn't touch. Nights were the worst. I'd sit by the fire, staring into the glow, and the pictures would come. His head pressed against my hand, that look in his eyes, heavy with something I didn't have a name for, over and over, like a song stuck on a single note. I didn't tell the men more than they already knew. What could I say? That a bear led me to a goat I'd given up for dead? That he touched me like a friend, not a beast? They'd laugh, or worse, they'd believe me, and I wasn't ready for either, so I carried it alone. And the strangest thing, it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean, like the air after rain. Days passed. The world kept turning, but I didn't. Not in the same way. I started noticing things. The way my flock pressed close against the wind. The way the dogs waited for my voice before they ran. And my voice changed. Softer. Not the hard bark I used to throw like stones. Because I realized something. Words can wound. You don't need teeth for that. You don't need claws. But a gesture, a simple, silent gesture, can heal more than you'll ever know. That bear never spoke a word, but what he said in that moment, it rewrote the map inside me. I stopped snapping at the dogs, stopped cursing the stubborn ram that always broke line. I even stopped hating the cold so much. Life felt wider, like there was a door I hadn't seen before, and now it was open, just a crack, enough to let something holy slip through. I thought about him every dawn, wondered where he was, what ridge carried his weight that day. I told myself I'd never see him again, that it was a single miracle, one flicker of lightning that never strikes twice. I believed that, until the morning I didn't. It was early. The kind of early that makes the sky feel unfinished. Mist draped the slopes like torn cloth. The flock stirred slow, hooves crunching frost. I was scanning the ridge for strays when I saw it. A shadow, tall, still, cut sharp against the paling sky. My breath locked. I knew that shape. I'd know it if I were blind. The bear. He stood there, far off, a dark monument in the mist. He didn't move, didn't need to, just stood, looking down at me across the gulf of stone and silence. I don't know how long we held that line, him on his throne of rock, me rooted to the earth below. My chest hurt, my hands shook, and then he turned. Slow as dusk, he slipped into the fog, and the ridge swallowed him whole. I never saw him again, but that moment, that shadow, that stillness, stitched itself into me, a thread I'll carry to the grave. If someone told me this story, I'd call them a liar. I'd laugh, shake my head, spit in the dirt and say, "You've been drinking." But this isn't a story I heard. It's a story I lived. And some nights, when the wind slides through these mountains like a ghost, I still wonder if I dreamed it all. But then I remember the weight of his head against my hand, the heat of his breath on my skin, the smell of fir and pine. You can't dream that real. So I swear on my life, on every stone of these hills. It happened. I saw it. I felt it. And it broke me in ways I didn't know a man could break. Because that bear taught me something no human ever could. Nature doesn't need words. And sometimes, silence hits harder than fists. People fight with their mouths more than their hands. They tear each other apart with sharp tongues and cold eyes. I've seen men spit words like bullets, and I've seen what they do to a soul. But a bear, a wild thing that owes you nothing. He spoke louder with one gesture than all the sermons I ever sat through. When he pressed his head against me, it wasn't power, it wasn't threat, it was trust. And that trust, it carved me open, made me softer in a way I didn't know I needed. I keep thinking, why me? Why not some hunter, some hiker, some other soul? Maybe there's no reason. Maybe there's every reason. Maybe nature doesn't waste her miracles. I don't tell this story to most folks. They wouldn't understand. Hell, half the time, I don't either. All I know is this. When I lay down at night and close my eyes, I don't see his teeth. I don't see his claws. I see his eyes. And in those eyes, black as river stones, deep as old earth, I saw something that made me feel small and holy all at once. Something that said, "You're part of this. Don't forget it, so I won't. Not ever." If you're listening to this and your heart's beating hard right now, if your throat feels tight and your skin's alive with something you can't name, you understand. Because this isn't just my story. It's ours. A reminder that the world still holds secrets sharp enough to cut you open and gentle enough to stitch you whole again. And if you don't believe me, I get it. God knows, some mornings, I don't believe it either. But I'll tell you this. If you ever find yourself on a high ridge with only wind and silence for company, look hard at the shadows. You might find out the world isn't as wild as you think. Or maybe it's wilder than you'll ever understand. If your heart skipped a beat just now, you understand. Subscribe. Here, we share true stories nature doesn't want you to forget. If you believe animals remember kindness, right, nature speaks without words. When I saw him standing at my gate, my breath caught in my throat. My knees almost buckled because for a split second I thought I was seeing a ghost. It had been a year, a whole year since I last laid eyes on that dog. And yet, there he was, thin as a shadow, ribs sharp against his skin, fur matted with mud and scars I didn't remember. But it wasn't the way he looked that froze my blood. It was his eyes. Those eyes weren't just looking at me, they were reaching for me, like they were trying to say something no human language could ever capture, and in that instant, the world around me just stopped. The sounds of the street faded, the wind vanished. All I could hear was the pounding in my chest. You ever look into an animal's eyes and feel it speak without words? If you have, you know what I mean. It's not imagination. It's something real, something raw, like your soul recognizes theirs. I stumbled forward, barely able to breathe. My throat tightened as I whispered his name, almost afraid to say it out loud, like saying it might shatter the fragile reality in front of me. Buddy. The second that name left my lips, his tail gave the tiniest twitch. Not wild wagging, not the happy shake I remembered, just a slow, trembling move, like he'd been holding on to that word for dear life. I swear, in that moment, my legs went weak, my vision blurred. Every memory I'd buried deep came crashing back all at once, like a wave that knocked the air right out of me. I saw the rain, the rope, his eyes that night, the promise I made, and that's when everything came flooding back to the day I first found him. But right now, God, right now, I couldn't think about the past. All I could think was, how was he here? Why? He shouldn't even know where I live now. He shouldn't know how to find me. And yet, here he was, looking at me like time never passed. I reached for the gate with shaking hands. My voice cracked as I whispered again, "Buddy, is it really you?" He didn't move at first. He just stood there, head low, tail still, like he was waiting for permission, or maybe waiting for me to prove I was still the same person he once trusted. I dropped to my knees, didn't care about the dirt, didn't care who saw me. I just knelt there, hands open, heart pounding so hard it hurt. And then, slowly, so slowly, he took a step, then another, each one like it cost him everything he had left. When his nose finally touched my palm, my whole body gave out. Tears I didn't even know I'd been holding back just broke free. I pressed my forehead to his and choked out, "Oh God, you came back." And here's the part I'll never forget as long as I live. He sighed, like an actual sigh of relief. His body shook, not from fear, but from something that felt like release, like he'd been carrying a weight for so long. And finally, he could let it go. I buried my fingers in his dirty fur, feeling every bone, every scar, and I hated myself for all of it. A year. Where had he been? What had he gone through? The question screamed inside me, but none louder than the one that nearly tore my heart out. Why did he come back? If you're wondering if animals forget, if you think time erases love, look into the eyes of a dog who walked God knows how many miles just to stand at your gate. That look will change you forever. I pulled back just enough to look at him again. His face was older, harder. His left ear had a tear in it. There was a gash across his side that had healed ugly. But those eyes, they were the same, maybe even deeper now, like they'd seen the whole world and still chose to come back here. I thought he just came back for food. That's what made sense, right? Dogs follow their stomachs. Maybe he was starving, desperate, and somehow remembered where I once gave him shelter. That had to be it. At least, that's what I told myself in that first moment. But I was wrong. Nature had a bigger plan, a plan I couldn't even imagine. And if I'd known then what I know now, I think I would have held him tighter, because that dog wasn't just back in my life for a meal. He came back for something much greater, something that would change everything I believed about loyalty and about love. The night I found him, I can still feel the cold in my bones. It wasn't just rain. It was a storm that cut through you like glass. Streets empty, air thick with that smell of wet asphalt and despair. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I had taken a wrong turn trying to get home. Funny how life works, isn't it? My headlights caught something at the edge of the road. At first I thought it was trash, a dark shape half hidden in the mud. But then it moved, just barely. A twitch, a slow lift of a head that looked too heavy for the body underneath it. I pulled over without thinking, opened the door, and stepped into the freezing rain. The wind slapped me like it was warning me to go back, but I didn't, because by then, I saw him. A dog, tied to a splintered wooden post with a piece of rope that cut so deep into his neck it was almost part of him. His fur was matted and soaked, ribs like prison bars under his skin. But the worst part? His eyes. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just looked at me, as if begging without sound. No anger, no fight, just this hollow, silent plea that said, "Please, not another person who walks away." I don't even remember reaching for my knife. 1 second, I was frozen. The next, I was kneeling in the mud, rain streaming down my face like tears. My hands shook so bad I almost dropped the blade, but I cut that rope. It snapped like a gunshot in the storm. And then, nothing happened. He didn't run. He didn't leap into my arms like the movies show. He just stood there, shivering, staring up at me like he couldn't believe it, like freedom was a trick. So I spoke, software slow. "You're okay now. You're coming with me." He tilted his head, barely, as if listening to words no one had said to him before. And then, with this almost fragile hesitation, he took one step toward me, then another, until his head brushed against my knee. That was the moment something inside me cracked wide open. I wrapped my jacket around him, even though it meant I'd freeze, lifted him. God, he weighed nothing, and carried him to the car. Every drop of rain that fell on his face felt like an insult to the world. How could anyone leave him like that? When we got home, I dried him with every towel I owned. He didn't fight, didn't flinch, just stood there, trembling, like he was still waiting for the pain to come. I gave him water, food. He ate like he was afraid it would disappear if he blinked. And then, the thing that broke me. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, just watching him. And slowly, so slowly, he walked over and laid his head on my lap. I can still feel the weight of it. That trust, so small, so fragile, but there. It was like holding someone's broken heart in your hands and knowing if you squeeze too tight, it'll shatter. I bent down and whispered, "You'll never suffer again. I promise." The words came out before I even thought about them, but the second they left my lips, they became a vow I felt in my bones. He sighed, actually sighed, like a man who had carried the world and finally put it down. That night, he slept at my feet. Every time I shifted, his head would lift, like he was making sure I didn't disappear. And every time, I'd whisper, "I'm here." Until finally, those tired eyes closed. But here's the thing about trust. It's fragile, and sometimes, promises break. Life doesn't care about your vows. It doesn't care about words spoken in the dark when you think nothing can tear them apart. I thought saving him was the end of his story. That I'd rescued him, and we'd ride off into some quiet, happily ever after. I was wrong. It wasn't the end. It was just the first chapter. From the second night on, he never let me out of his sight. If I stood up, he stood up. If I moved from the couch to the kitchen, he followed so close I could feel his breath on my ankles. It wasn't annoying, it was heartbreaking, like he was afraid that if he blinked, I'd vanish, and he'd wake up tied to that same post in the rain. I started calling him Buddy. It just slipped out one morning when he was curled by the door, waiting for me to finish my coffee. "Come on, Buddy," I said without thinking. His ears twitched like it was the first nice word he'd ever heard in his life. After that, it stuck. He learned his name fast, faster than any dog I'd ever seen. First, it was the little things, a glance when I said it, a tail flick. Then, within days, if I called Buddy from the other room, he'd come running like the floor was on fire, like he couldn't get to me fast enough. Nights were the hardest, for both of us. I didn't want him in the living room alone, so I brought an old blanket into my bedroom, laid it by the bed. He curled up so tight it looked like he was trying to disappear into himself. I knelt down, stroked his head, and whispered, "You're safe now. I'll never hurt you." The words came easy, but every time I said them, I meant them more. That became our ritual. Every night, before I turned out the light, I'd talk to him, not like a pet, but like a person. I told him about my day, about how the world didn't make sense sometimes. And even though he never spoke, his eyes, they listened. They understood in a way no human ever had. After a week, he started smiling. Not with his mouth. Dogs don't smile like us, but with his eyes. That look, that soft, glowing look that says, "I trust you. You're my whole world now." If you've seen it, you know. And if you haven't, God, I hope you do someday. He followed me everywhere, to the store, on walks, even to the bathroom if I didn't shut the door fast enough. It was funny at first, then humbling, because I realized, when you're the only safe place someone has ever known, they cling to you like air. But life has a way of testing every promise you make. I started falling behind on bills. My hours at work got cut. Some days I came home so tired I just sat on the floor with Buddy's head in my lap, wondering how I was going to keep it all together. He didn't care about money, didn't care about the world closing in on me. He just cared that I was there. And that look in his eyes, it made me believe I could handle anything. Then one day, a friend came over, saw Buddy curled at my feet, and she said it so casually, like it was nothing. "You can't keep him forever, you know." The words hit me like a punch. I laughed it off, but that night, they echoed in my head, over and over. You can't keep him forever. What if she was right? What if life got so hard I couldn't feed him? What if I lost everything? The thought clawed at my chest until I could barely breathe. I pulled Buddy close, buried my face in his fur, and whispered like a prayer, "No, never. I promised you." His tail thumped against the floor like he believed me without question, like the word forever actually meant something. But deep down, a seed of fear had been planted, one I couldn't shake, because what if life forced me to break a promise I never planned to break? What if loving him wasn't enough? I thought I'd find a way to keep him, that no matter what, we'd stick together through everything. I was wrong. The eviction notice came like a thunderclap, cold, harsh, impossible to ignore, the kind of letter that rips through your world and leaves a silence heavier than any storm. I stared at it for what felt like hours, unable to move. The landlord's words were clear. I had 30 days to leave. No exceptions, no mercy. My mind raced. How could I keep everything together when everything was falling apart? And then, like a knife twisting deeper, I realized I couldn't take Buddy with me. Not this time. I'd lost my job a month ago, bills stacked up like tombstones, and now a move out of town for work, forced and sudden. The only option was to leave him behind. I tried to find someone who could love him like I did. Called every friend, every neighbor. No one said yes. It felt like I was handing him off to strangers, to a world full of people who didn't understand. A world that didn't care. I didn't want to believe that was the end. But the truth was clear. I couldn't take him, and I couldn't leave him alone. So I found a man, a quiet man with tired eyes, who promised to care for Buddy, said he loved dogs and had a big yard, said he'd feed him and keep him safe. I wanted to believe him. The morning I left, the sky was gray and heavy with rain. Buddy sat by the door, his head low, eyes wide. We didn't speak. Words felt useless. But I knelt down, looked deep into his eyes, those same eyes that had trusted me so completely, and whispered, "I'll come back for you. Don't hate me." His tail gave the faintest wag. That tiny flick was like a promise from him too, like he knew this wasn't goodbye forever. I lifted the leash, opened the door, and the man took Buddy gently by the collar. I stepped into my car, heart hammering so loud I thought he'd hear it. I glanced back one last time. Buddy was watching me, silent, still, as if he was waiting for the car to stop, for me to call him back. But I didn't. The rain blurred the moment, but I swear it looked like tears slid down his muzzle, and then the car pulled away. I told myself he'd forget me, that in time he'd find new love, new safety, that I'd made the right choice. I was wrong, because some promises aren't just words. Some promises live inside the eyes of the ones we love, and sometimes they come back to remind us what really matters. That year was the longest silence I ever lived through. Every day felt like walking through a thick fog, trying to hold onto a memory that kept slipping farther away. I worked harder than I thought I could, trying to keep my head above water, but the nights, oh, the nights, were the worst. I'd lie awake in a quiet room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his absence pressing down on my chest. Sometimes in the dark, I thought I heard him, the soft tap-tap of paws on the floor, the gentle scrape of nails on the old wooden planks. But when I reached out, when I opened my eyes, there was nothing but silence. I'd sit up, heart racing, searching the shadows, wondering if maybe I was going crazy, or maybe if he was still out there, somewhere. I tried to tell myself that the man I left him with was good, that he was feeding him, keeping him warm. I even got messages, short texts that said, "Buddy is fine," but the words felt empty, like echoes in a hollow room. Sometimes I'd whisper into the darkness, hoping the wind would carry my voice to him. "If you're still out there, I miss you." And I meant it with everything inside me. I thought he was safe forever, thought the nightmare was over, that the storm had passed. But that day changed everything. I was sitting on my porch late one night when I heard it, scratching at the gate, software tentative, like a whisper against the cold metal. At first I thought I was imagining it, the wind, a branch scraping, but then it came again, clearer this time, scratching, patient, insistent. My heart slammed in my chest. I stood up slowly, the night air suddenly thick and sharp. Every step toward the gate felt heavier than the last, like walking underwater. And then I saw him, thin, scarred, ragged in a way that made my breath catch sharp in my throat. But those eyes, they burned with something I could never forget. Recognition, hope, a fire that had survived 1,000 storms. My legs gave out. I dropped to the ground, hands trembling, breath gone. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was here. Closer now, the dog lifted his paw, slowly, carefully, and placed it right on my chest, just like he did that first night. That night, I saved him. It wasn't just a touch. It was a message, a promise. He looked at me like he was saying, "You kept your word." Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to shout, to scream, to collapse into the night with relief and wonder. But even as I held him, hugging him like I'd never let go again, a question knifed through the joy. Why now? How did he find his way? Because I thought the miracle was over the moment he was back in my arms. I was wrong. The real blow was still waiting. The truth came crashing down like a storm I never saw coming. I finally tracked down the man who was supposed to care for Buddy. His eyes didn't meet mine. He told me bluntly, coldly, that he'd abandoned the dog months ago, left him by the side of a highway, alone. I sat there, numb, heart pounding so loud it felt like a drum in my ears. How could anyone do that? How could they break the trust of a creature who had survived so much already? Then it hit me. Buddy hadn't just wandered back. He hadn't been found or rescued again. He had walked miles and miles through storms and hunger just to find me. I remembered that night, the first night I brought him home, the night I whispered to him through the dark, "You're safe now. I'll never hurt you." He came back for those words, not for food, not for shelter, for those promises that had etched themselves into his heart. It's impossible to explain how a dog can carry human words in his soul, but sometimes words hit harder than fists. They can chain you or set you free. Buddy had been chained by pain and fear his whole life, but those words, my words, had broken those chains, had called him home. I wanted to cry, to laugh, to fall to my knees and thank the universe for this miracle. Because that dog, he wasn't just a dog anymore. He was proof. Proof that love, even in the darkest places, can survive. After everything, I knew I couldn't go back to my old life. The job that drained me, the routine that felt empty, the world that forgot what really matters. I quit. Not because I was reckless, but because I had finally seen something that changed me forever. Buddy changed me. I started a rescue project, just a small one for now, a place for lost souls like him, for animals who've been forgotten, abandoned, broken. Because if there's one thing I learned from that dog, it's this: promises matter, even to those who can't speak. Every animal out there understands more than we give them credit for. They feel fear, hope, love, betrayal. They remember kindness, or the lack of it. They carry words deep inside their hearts, even if they never say a single one. That dog taught me that. He taught me that trust isn't given lightly. It's earned. It's sacred. And sometimes, it's the thing that saves us all. So, if you ever think animals don't understand what we say, think again. They hear us in ways that go beyond words, and they never forget. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around you like a soft blanket, pulling you into a stillness you don't want to break. Buddy lay at my feet, peaceful, safe, finally, at rest. The same dog who had wandered through storms and hunger, through pain and silence, was here, with me. His chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths, his scars still there, but softened by time and care. His eyes closed, trusting, unafraid. I knelt beside him, fingers trembling as I brushed his fur. "I kept my word," I whispered, "and so did you." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with everything we'd both been through. Sometimes, when I'm alone with that memory, I can't believe it happened. Not really. If someone told me this story, I'd call them a liar, say it was made up to comfort the broken. But I saw it. I felt it. Every impossible moment. The dog didn't come back for food. He came back for love. That love, quiet, patient, fierce, is stronger than time. Stronger than pain, stronger than everything that tries to tear us apart. It's the kind of love that changes you forever. If your heart is full right now, write this: animals remember love, because they do, and that memory, it stays with you. If your heart just stopped like mine, hit subscribe, because nature still has secrets like this, and they're all true.